Hi guys, I'm just going to take a second to talk about the movie Harvest of Fears. In this movie it kind of goes on to talk about GMOs and what they are and a lot of people's stance on them and how they help us and how they hinder us. Three pros that I noticed while watching this movie is with the use of GMOs, there's less of a use of pesticides, which in turn, is better for us because pesticides are harmful to the soil that we use, the environment, and the food that we eat because it's, the chemicals it's used to kill all the pests. Another pro is it provides more product, which is good within itself because it's more profitable for farmers and the people that sell the product. And last pro that I've noticed is that GMOs actually do extend the shelf life of produce, which not only benefits the farmer and the markets or anyone that sells the food because they're not having to do as much waste, but it's also beneficial for a family that doesn't have to keep returning to the store to buy more foods every week. With that being said, three cons that I notice is, not really knowing what we're eating and how they were made, and not really know that we are eating genetically modified organisms. Another argument is that a con is tampering nature. It's not the, organically grown food that you would have seen years and years ago. It's something new because it's how we have made it. A third con I've known is that there's not necessarily a definitive proof that GMOs are safe, and the fact that they don't feel a need to put a label on the food that is GMO is kind of off-putting. With that being said, they talked about radical environmental groups such as Greenpeace. Their intentions were to try and warn the public about GMOs and targeting different companies such as Kellogg's, and made this huge deal to shame them for using GMOs. But whereas most of them chose not to believe the science that disproves all of their claims, such as they had a claim that GMOs were actually killing off a lot of animals, like the monarch butterfly, even though that was disproved and silly. Another is industrial scale farmers. They are completely for GMOs because it helps save their crops and able to produce more, and without the use of pesticides, which is a huge thing because a lot of pesticides will also kill good crops. Organic farmers are against GMOs mainly because they believe that farming should be done in harmony with nature. I kind of think that that's interesting because companies such as Greenpeace are against genetically modified ways of growing food, and when organic farmers still use many different forms of pesticides, which kills other insects such as like the caterpillar, which is basically, like the monarch butterfly. Next is agricultural biotech companies. So from the movie, it seems like agricultural biotech companies such as Monsanto and Avantis are typically pro-GMO because they argue that the use of pesticides are a dying business. Monsanto is determined to introduce new foods with GMOs so that, there is more of a use of GMOs. Federal agencies. This is the one that gets me because a lot of the federal agencies that are keeping us from eating garbage and things that are bad for us are actually pro-GMO. There's USDA, which is in charge of safe growth produces, which is in charge of making sure that the food is safe to eat. EPA is involved with food use of pesticides, and not only that, but EPA is also in charge of keeping farms and different companies accountable for their actions, so that if it is one day it comes that we find out the GMOs are bad for us or whatever, it's their job to keep them accountable and make sure that they're not actually selling foods with GMOs in it. Last is the American consumer. And there is a worry that people will revolt against the use of GMOs, which seems a little weird to me. It's been seen in a lot of European countries, but that just kind of speaks to the effect of GMOs that it has on their cuisines, which is like a culture around their food, where as Americans we don't necessarily have that culture. It's more of a, we're hungry, so we ate type of thing. So I don't really foresee a revolt necessarily in the American culture as an American consumer. Um, hmm. But yeah, it seemed like in the movie it said that 7 out of 10 Americans trusted our regulators, such as like the FDA and the EPA. So there's not a worry against GMOs. And last but not least is my stance on GMOs. I personally am for GMOs in the sense that there's not enough evidence that supports the ideas that GMOs are actually bad for us or detrimental to the environment for that matter. I do, on the other hand, believe that there should be better labeling on genetically modified foods. I think that there is no need to label. Oh, sorry. I think that the fact that there's no need to label things is kind of off-putting because it makes me wonder, like, what is it that makes it so bad that there's a stigma against, like, putting it on the label? Most of the people that read labels or go to read labels is because they want to know what's in our food. What is it that I'm eating? How is it made? Because that's of a concern to them. But for the most part, I'm supportive of GMOs because they're less harmful than pesticides and can help farmers produce more food quickly, which is incredibly necessary considering that the population is growing rapidly and there is that huge concern about how are we one day going to feed such a largely populated world.